let me just say my respect for anyone who makes these videos, whether it being poker related or not, has gone up dramatically in the first 30 minutes that I've been trying to film this, because this is difficult. Well, you may be wondering why I'm here, and I think a good answer would be the same reason that you're probably here as well, is that we both like poker. We both enjoy playing poker, and we both like watching poker content, because that is the reason I'm starting this in the first place. I enjoy watching YouTube and obviously poker YouTube. So that is a solid way to break the ice. As for myself, my name is Harrison Brown. I'm sure you can tell by the channel name if you haven't noticed already, but I am a 21-year-old student down here in South Florida, and again, I like playing cards. As for the duration of me playing cards, I've only been playing for 2.5 years, so I am by no means an expert. I don't claim to be the best player, hardly ever. So, I mean, at the same time, it is something that I feel like I know enough of to make it enjoyable for at least 3 people. There we have it. As for tonight and this video, I'm just doing a little trial session because, again, this is totally new. So I'm just planning on heading to, actually, let's do this. Down in South Florida, at least where I live, we have 2 main casinos. One, I'm sure if you live outside of Florida, you're familiar with the Hard Rock Casino. The Guitar Hotel, the property is insane. I've been there numerous times. Love it. It's just a tad bit further away. And whether or not we go there now or later, I'm sure you will see it sooner or later. And then the second property is the Seminole Coconut Creek. This, again, is a smaller, well, obviously a smaller property, but it is a bit closer to where I stay. So that is where I normally grind, where I normally play. But tonight, to add a little bit of variance before the game even starts, let's ask Siri and have her figure out where we are playing tonight. So, all right, so this is the deal. Coconut Creek's gonna be 1, Guitar's gonna be 2. So if Siri picks 1 or 2, that will determine where we're playing tonight. So, let's get it. Siri, pick a number 1 to 2. Oh, I wish she was talking. 1. Coconut Creek it is. Alright y'all, we just got here around 9:30 and we're headed down to the casino, and boom, there's the poker room from afar. It is a nice room. They have around 28 tables, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but anyways, on a Tuesday night, not a lot of action to be found. There was only around 5 games running, which stinks, but anyways, we were able to find a game, and here is me shuffling some chips. Alright boys, so we are here at the studio, at the setup, and we are going to bring you some hand reviews. And let me just say that this is actually not the first time I filmed the hand reviews. I recently just filmed them yesterday, but going back through the footage, I'll let y'all see right here, it just simply wasn't cutting it. One of 2 reasons. 3 reasons. One reason being that, if you can't tell, I have a microphone in front of my face, and I am probably the only person on the face of this earth that forgot that they had a professional grade microphone just sitting in their closet. So we are putting this microphone to good use. Another thing is these lights. It just brings the environment a little bit better, and that is always good. And lastly, just doing it once, I already feel a bit more comfortable talking about these hands and being in front of the camera. So let me just start off by saying this. From a monetary standpoint, this session went great. I cashed out for an amount that I will disclose later. But from a playing perspective, this session was difficult in the sense that I didn't realize how hard it is to keep track of your hands. At the table, I think within the first 3 orbits, I got involved in 3 pots, and by the time I got dealt my following hand, I was still taking down the notes from the previous hand. So I'm gonna have to find some sort of method that will let me obviously play my best, along with getting correct information. So that was a challenge that I completely was not expecting. And then lastly, my phone died while I was there. So completely unprepared, but luckily my phone died towards the end of the session, so we still got, I believe, around 10 hands to show you guys. All right, so as I go to the table, I notice that it is a full table, so we are gonna be playing 8-handed this session, or for the majority of the session until the late hours of the night. Also, right off the rip, I've noticed that most of the players at the table are older gentlemen, which, as you guys are aware, love to limp. Very passive play for the most part, and they view, from my experience, younger guys such as myself more aggressive, and they probably will call down lighter. So, you know, you hate to bring variables and have table images being altered before you even play, but that is just the truth, and that's just that is what I'm perceiving before I even sit down. So with that being said, we go ahead and sit down for 200, which is slightly more on the smaller side, because at Seminole Coconut Creek, that is the max buy-in. While at the Hard Rock, you can buy in for 300. So also with that variable, we're gonna be playing slightly tighter just because we start off with 100 big blinds, which does not leave us with as much wiggle room, say if we were to buy in at the Hard Rock. But regardless, we get into some hands right off the rip. So basically something that I took from this is that going into the future, I really want to try to record at the table. One, it'll probably be more entertaining for you guys because you get to see my whole cards and see the environment, because I know from a viewer that is typically more fun. And then also 2 is it'll be easier in terms of note taking. For myself, I can go back at the footage and see exactly what I played and see people's proper bet sizes from their different positions, and it'll just help me and probably be more entertaining for y'all. So just want to get that off my chest. And that's the last thing I gotta say before we get into these hands. All right, so something that I probably was doing at the beginning of the session that I should work on in the future, which will also come with just playing longer sessions, is getting hands that are more eventful. But for this session, I'm just including the majority of my hands. So something to mention about Coconut Creek, you can only straddle from the button and under the gun. I know some places you can straddle from any position, but from here, those are the only 2 positions, and just as other places, it's typically on the button. So that's what happens here. The button goes ahead and bumps it up to 5 before the cards are even dealt. And under the gun, looks down at its 2 cards and ends up min clicking to a total of $10. So folds back to me, and I am in middle position looking down at 2 sevens. This guy who bumped it up to $10, he only has around $60 in a stack, so I go ahead and 3-bet to 60, hoping to isolate him to just rip it all in. Happy to get it in against him, and that is exactly what happens. He goes ahead and jams for a total of 51, and we go ahead and snap it off for around $20 more. We are just praying for a clean flop, and as the flop comes down, ace, king, 6, we are basically just going ahead and waving the white flag, hoping to improve on the turn or river. When the turn comes a 10 of hearts and the river comes a 4 of clubs, we already accept defeat, and sure enough, when we table our 7s, he shows us ace jack. So donating a little bit in that hand, but I don't think there was anything I could have done differently. So this is probably one of my mistakes of the session. I end up getting 2 3s under the gun and decide to limp them. And sure enough, +1 goes ahead and bumps it up to 10, and it folds around to me. So I never am limping 3s here, folding to a raise. Happily make the call for $8 more, and we go heads up to a flop. Hoping to see a beautiful flop, which does come in the form of Queen 5 3 all spades. So on a monotone board, we do in fact flop a set, which is great. Still slightly cautious of the flush just because we obviously don't carry the 3 of spades because it's on the board. Anyways, I go ahead and just do a standard check to the aggressor. Sure enough, he fires out for $15. So a fairly hefty size on this flop. So I'm assuming he has some sort of piece. I just go ahead and hit him with a check raise to 45. I think a flat in this spot is slightly under-upping my hand. So I think a check raise here is just the best play. If he has a flush, he has a flush. We just start simply never getting away from this heads up. And if he does have a flush, we can always suck out. So planning on sucking out if he has it, he goes ahead and doesn't call, doesn't fold. He goes ahead and puts his whole stack in there, which is $125 more. We go ahead and snap it off fast as possible. looking to improve or hold. We don't really know what we need. Sure enough, we do improve on the turn. We fill up immediately when the 5 of hearts comes out, and then an irrelevant 9 on the river. So always good here. We just go ahead and table our 3s, and sure enough, he shows ace queen without a spade. So our image definitely came into play in that hand. He certainly probably put me on a busted flush draw. That's where knowing your table image certainly comes into play. Being a little bit card dead for the next bit, we look down in middle position with ace deuce of diamonds, and we are welcomed by a limp from under the gun and raised by +1. We could easily be 3-betting this hand, but again, being the aggressor at the table, now I would prefer to put more premiums in my 3-bet range, especially in this position. So I just go ahead and just flat call, hoping to see what happens on later streets. So with that being said, we do get a cold call from the hijack as well, along with the cutoff. The 2 blinds fold, and under the gun ends up letting it go as well. So when the flop comes down 5-3 deuce rainbow, we obviously have a pair of deuces, but certainly that's never good enough in this spot. So happily, the initial raiser checks. Happy to check this one, and surprisingly, action actually checks around. So we go ahead to see a free turn, which comes in the form of a 10 of clubs. Not improving our hand whatsoever. Action again checks to me, and happily check it. Sure enough, checks around once again. The river, on the other hand, is a miracle 2 of hearts. So we go ahead and get trips on this beautiful board, praying for a bet from under the gun, and as he's sitting there viewing the board, he slides out a beautiful bet of $25, folds to me, and I'm sitting here, and I actually go into the tank on this bet for one of 2 reasons. One, because I'm trying to determine what hands he could possibly be repping, what his bluffs are versus what his value hands are. So knowing this specific player, if he would have flopped 2 pair or better, I am almost 100% sure he would have been betting it either on the flop and certainly on the turn. So assuming maybe that his value hands could be 2x, which obviously we beat all 2x's, or potentially 5x, but that is kind of a stretch just in this 1-2 game, just based on what these guys are playing like. A lot of checking down with marginal hands. So I go ahead and just decide to put him all in, and sure enough, it folds around to him, and he goes ahead and just snap folds it. So I'm sure I could have raised him any amount and he would have just let it go. He didn't really even look at the amount, so I'm sure he didn't have much of anything. So in this next hand, y'all will get a kick out of this. I have 7-8 of spades. Anyways, I don't remember my position because it was irrelevant at the time, but anyways, I bump it up and get 2 callers. Sure enough, flop comes all Broadway cards, which are suited, and especially no piece of this when the girl to my right leads out for whatever sizing. I don't even look at it. I just go ahead and muck it. And the other player actually ends up raising. And sure enough, that other player actually ends up calling. So on the turn, forget what it is. But anyways, so the girl who led out on the flop fires again, and the opponent shoves the turn. She snap calls, and get a load of this. He ended up flopping a royal flush.
Turn my hand is a royal flush. Royal flush, turn my hand.
I beat you to it. I never got one before.
This man right here just hit a royal, flopped it. Me personally, in my 2.5 years of play, I have never seen a flopped royal flush. I have seen a royal flush, but I have never seen a flop royal flush. So, good for him. The guy gets the high hand, obviously, for the hour, which at Coconut Creek is 150 bucks on just the normal days. So, he picks up 150 bucks along with a $200 royal flush bonus. So good for him. He definitely won a lot more money that was in the pot, and surprisingly got stacks in flopping a royal. So no idea what that other girl had, but you know, that's still pretty cool. Being card dead for quite some time, when I'm under the gun and happily look down at an 8-6 of hearts, that is certainly good enough for a raise for me. So I go ahead and bump it up to 6, and we get no respect as 6 players call. So going to a flop, hoping to get some piece of this, which comes down queen 5-3 with 2 hearts. So essentially one of the best flops I could ask for with 8-6 of hearts. I go ahead and c-bet it $20 when it checks to me. The only person who calls is the player in the cutoff, but he is an older gentleman, which, as you know, they always think the young guys are bluffing. So an irrelevant deuce of diamonds comes on the turn. Sure, ace 4 gets there, 6-4, but I'm just never putting those cards in this player's range. So far, I go ahead and slow down with a check, basically planning on calling any size bet on the turn. But one size that I will certainly not be calling for is all of his chips. So he goes ahead and slides out $140, goes ahead and jams it right in my face, and I just kind of am speechless, and it stinks to be folding to just a turn bet with essentially one of the most ideal flops, but we are certainly not getting the right price to continue. We go ahead and just let it go. All right, so in this next hand, we experience a cutoff open to $14, and we are on the button and we look down at 2-9. So this player has not been opening up too often, and then especially not for that sizing. So being a little bit cautious, I think 9s still are a little bit too strong to fold in this spot, especially on the button. So we go ahead and happily call, and we go ahead to a flop heads up. So when the flop comes down king, king, 10, we obviously could hope for a better flop, but when she checks to me, we happily just check it back. So when the turn comes to 7 of diamonds, and she checks to me again, I figured that she is most likely either just done with the hand, doesn't have too much, or wants to get to showdown cheaply. So taking all that into consideration, I am actually assuming my 9s are best here. I'd assume she bet all king X and 10X and better on the turn. So when she goes ahead and checks to me, I bet $20 for a value, hoping to get called by a potential straight draw and flush draw. She does in fact call. So that already kind of startles me a little bit, but again, I can't be too worried about it just because again, there are a lot of draws on the board. So when the river comes down the deuce of diamonds, essentially a total brick, whoever was ahead on the turn is certainly still ahead, and she checks to me once again. So I go ahead and bet out $35, which I personally think is a mistake just because I think, one, this player is only going to be calling with better hands, and two, we already beat all of her draws. So when I bet 35 and get check raised to 115, which is all of her chips, I go into the tank. Certainly, as you guys are aware, you know, in the 1-2 games, there is not a lot of check raise bluffing on the river. So I think that is where varying between the 2-5 games along with the 1-2 game can actually negatively impact your play. And with all the busted draws on board, I go ahead and just kind of shrug it off and call it. And sure enough, she shows the goods. She shows king 10. So I think looking back at it, it kind of seems like a slam dunk fold. But in 2-5, I think people are capable of this bluff. As the clock ticks throughout the night, the older gentlemen get a bit sleepy. Their wife needs them home for whatever reason. A lot of these older gentlemen have been replaced by younger players around their 20s and 30s. So assuming a little bit more aggression going forward, and excited to finally get some action at the table. So with that being said, I am under the gun and I happily look down at 2 beautiful black queens. I go ahead and bump it up to 7, and sure enough, we do get a call by the hijack, and the cutoff surprisingly bumps it up to $28. So I figured he wouldn't be doing this too light after I open under the gun, especially in a 1-2 game. So easily can put this in my 3-bet range, which I would normally do. So as expected, the hijack does get out of the way, and we go heads up to a flop. So the flop comes down ace 5 3 of spades. We obviously are a bit worried about that ace because a lot of ace king, ace jack holdings are going to probably be in his 3-bet range, but it is also kind of a decent card because it eliminates the combination of pocket aces he could be holding. But regardless, we just play a little bit with caution, so I go ahead and check it to the aggressor as I normally would. Sure enough, he throws out a c-bet of $35. So I think folding to just a flop bet along with our queen high flush is a little bit too weak, so we go ahead and make the call. So the turn brings absolutely no help whatsoever. It comes to the 6 of clubs in a bit of an awkward spot, hoping that we could see a free river. So we go ahead and check it to him, and he does not allow that to happen. He goes ahead and fires for $85, leaving himself with a minuscule bet on the river, about like $50. So essentially, if I call this $85 bet, I just gotta stick with it till the river. So I go into the tank on this one thinking, with this player, I think he would be checking back a lot of his ace X on the turn. One key blocker that we do block is king queen suited. So basically, I certainly would expect this player to be betting a bit smaller on the turn. So when he sizes up on a blank such as this, it makes me think that he is turning most of his hands into a bluff, or he is completely nutted. But again, we do block that with the king queen. We have the second nut blocker. So all things considered, I actually decided to peel one once again because again, I think this is a more aggressive young player. So I think he is capable of firing a second bullet. And sure enough, when the river becomes the ace of clubs, we are liking our hand even more, as again, that eliminates it only to one combination of pocket aces and approving us to 2 pairs. So I go ahead and just check it, basically just already putting the chips in my hand to call if he jams. And sure enough, that is what he does. He puts in his last $53 and we go ahead and just snap it off. And surprisingly, he shows pocket jacks with the jack of spades. So his line, in my opinion, just makes absolutely no sense. I don't see too much value in sizing up on that turn like that. You know, we call and make the right decision. So we can never complain about that, and we happily take his chips. So late night, we are 5-handed at this point, so I decide to straddle it to avoid chop pot. As expected, the under the gun player does call, +1 calls, and the hijack ends up bumping it up to 31. So he sizes up a little bit in this situation, which by appearance, this player, he's new at the table, and he is wearing headphones, and essentially looks like he knows what he's doing. So reading the situation, it folds back to me, and with ace jack, this is certainly more my 3-bet range, so I go ahead and just bump it up to $100. So, and sure enough, it folds around to the initial raiser, and he goes into the tank, and luckily lets it go. So we pick up a few chips pre-flop, and we can never complain about it. All right, so in this next hand, I am on the button once again, and I decide to straddle. Under the gun calls, as expected, middle position calls, hijack calls, and we look down at ace 10 of spades. So we go ahead and bump it up to 25 just purely for value, and expectedly it does fold around to the hijack, which he does not fold or call. He bumps it up to $125. So 5xing my initial raise is quite a large sizing. From my experience, limp raising on the flop is almost always aces or kings. But knowing this specific player and me showing the ace jack the previous hand, he knows I'm capable of raising light in the spot. So I go ahead and tank, and I eventually settle on a fold, which I know it's the wrong decision because he showed an 8 of diamonds. So whether it be another 8 or an ace, we were either flipping or had him absolutely crushed. So in going forward against that player type, I definitely just need to be making that call, because I certainly don't think he'd be 5xing any of his value hands pre-flop, and again, certainly against me, I think this is weighted just way heavily towards bluffs. So exactly 1 orbit later, we shadow the button once again, and we get a call from under the gun and the hijack, that same player we mentioned last hand. Hoping that we have something to play around with, and that does come in the form of 2 black kings. So playing the image, we go ahead and size up slightly to $30, hoping for a call from the hijack for him to do something goofy, and that does not happen. Only the under the gun player calls. But happy to get some action. We go ahead to a flop of queen 7 deuce rainbow, so the most dry flop possible. Hoping he got any piece of this, I throw out a super small bet of $20, and he snap folds. So stinks I couldn't get any more value, but can't complain whatsoever. At this point, we are playing 6-handed, and there is still straddling going on. Sure enough, that's what happens this hand. The button straddles it up to 5, and it folds around to me in the small blind with 10-9 offsuit. Just basically trying to steal the blinds in the straddle. I go ahead and bump it up to 15. So unfortunately, the big blind and the button both call. So hoping to hit any piece of this flop, and it does come in the form of middle pair on jack 9-7 with 2 spades. So this flop obviously favoring their calling range way more than my raising range. I go ahead and just check it, hoping to see a free turn, which is what happens. So going to a turn, hoping to approve, which does come in this form of a queen of diamonds. So now we do have 3rd pair, but we are open-ended. So when I go ahead and just slow down, even though looking back at it, I don't mind a bet on this card just again because a lot of Queen X does favor my raising range, but I decided just to check it and plan on calling any bet. So sure enough, it does check to the button, which he fires out for $15. Happily make the call, and sure enough, the big blind calls as well. So still going 3 ways to a river, which comes the deuce of hearts. Hoping to get a cheap showdown, we go ahead and just check it. That's not what happens, as action does check to the button once again, which he fires out for $30. So a lot of bluffs could be in his range, such as miss spades, miss diamonds, and 10x. So with all those factors said, getting 4-1 on a call, I happily just toss in the chips. Luckily, the big blind folds, and he snap mucks. So good utilizing the situation from our part, and we happily go on to the next hand. So in this hand, we experience an under the gun lip and a hijack open at $15, which is certainly on the large side. We look down in the small blind at ace jack of hearts. So this player who did bump it up to 15 is the same player who 3-bet me with the 8 of diamonds to $125 pre-flop. So with my ace jack of hearts, and me and him have kind of been clashing heads this whole night, I go ahead and just flat call, which I could obviously put ace jack in my 3-betting range, but being suited, it flops a little bit more well than offsuit. So I go ahead and just flat call, and under the gun also calls. So we are going 3 ways to a flop, which comes down jack high with 2 spades. Obviously loving this flop. Actually goes ahead and checks to the initial aggressor, which he sizes up to the tune of $40. So betting around like 80% pot, I go ahead and think the only appropriate play here is just flat calling. I don't think we accomplish really anything by raising besides falling out worse. So that's exactly what I do. I just go ahead and flat call and hoping for a clean turn. So the turn does not come too clean, it comes down the 7 of spades. So I go ahead and just check it over to him, hoping to see a free river, in which surprisingly he checks it back. So basically eliminating all flushes out of his range with this specific player type. We go ahead and head to a turn which comes down the 8 of spades. So at this point really all we have is a bluff catcher, and I think about leading on this card, but I like to just check, just because it would stink to get check raised, and I think this player is capable of doing that with a bluff. So shuffling the chips, getting ready to do whatever we need to do, but luckily it does not come to that as he checks, and praying that we got the winner, we show over our cards, and unfortunately he has us beat, but not in the form of a flush. He actually shows middle set on the flop, so luckily that run out actually saved us our whole stack, most likely. Boom, so I hope y'all liked the video, and the reason I am talking to you guys on this phone right now is because I forgot a valuable piece of information to share with you guys, which is the amount that I won this session. So I was in the game for $200 and I ended up cashing out for $532. With that being said, that is a profit of $332 and a total of 3 hours and 30 minutes of play. So I hope you all liked the video, and I'll let y'all get back to it. All right, y'all, that was the video. I hope y'all enjoyed it as much as I did making this video. Going forward, this will certainly be something that I will be getting better at, and the production will be getting better, the hand histories will be getting better. In the future, we will be trying to film our whole cards. In this first session, I kind of just want to test the waters and see how it would go. But, you know, being a bit difficult taking down the notes at the table, I think that filming the whole cards will be best for both of us. Anyways, y'all, if you enjoyed the video, please hit that button. And when I say that button, I mean the like or the subscribe, or both if you want to. It'll help me a lot. It'll help the channel reach more viewers, and it'll also just make me happy. So if y'all want to do that, it'll be greatly appreciated. If not, no worries. Just tune back in and give it another chance. Anyways, y'all, I hope y'all all have a good day, good night, wherever you're from. Anyways, y'all, keep up the run good, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.